Section 3 of Silver Pitchers and Independence, a Centennial Love Story by Louisa M. Alcott. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Holly Popple. Section 4, Silver Pitchers. Chapter 5, What Pris Did. Priscilla, meantime, was racking her brain to discover how she could help Philip, for since she had broken off her engagement, no one spoke of him to her, and she could only judge of how things were going with him by what she saw and heard as she went about her daily task. Pris kept school, and the road which she must take twice a day led directly by the office where Phil was studying medicine with old Dr. Buffum. Formerly, she always smiled and nodded as she passed, or stopped to chat a moment with a student who usually chanced to be taking a whiff of fresh air at that instant. Little notes flew in and out, and often her homeward walk was cheered by a companion who taught the pretty teacher lessons she found very easy to learn. A happy time! But it was all over now, and brief glimpses of a brown head bent above a desk near that window was the only solace poor Pris had. The head never turned as she went by, but she felt sure Phil knew her step and found that moment, as she did, the hardest of the day. She longed to relent, but dared not yet. He longed to show that he had repented, but found it difficult without a sign of encouragement. So they went their separate ways, seldom meeting, for Phil stuck to his books with dogged resolution, and Pris had no heart for society. Of course the affair was discussed with all the exasperating freedom of a country town, some blaming Pris for undue severity, some praising her spirit, and some, friends not gossips, predicting that both would be the better for the trial, which would not separate them long. Of this latter class were Portia and Polly, who felt it their duty to lend a hand when matters reached a certain point. "Pris, dear, may I tell you something that I think you'd be glad to know?" began Polly, joining her friend one afternoon as she went home weary and alone. "You may tell me anything," and Pris took her arm as if she felt the need of sympathy. "You know Dr. Buffum let Phil help with Ned, so we have seen a good deal of him, and that is how I found out what I've got to tell you." "He spoke of me, then?" whispered Pris eagerly. "Not a word until Ned made him. My boy is fond of your boy, and they had confidences which seem to have done them both good. Of course, Ned didn't tell me all about it, as we tell things. Men never do, they are so proud and queer, but he said this: 'Look here, Polly, you must be very kind to Phil and stand by him all you can, or he will go down. He is doing his best and will hold on as long as he can. But a fellow must have comfort and encouragement of some sort, and if he don't get the right kind, he'll try the wrong.'" "Oh, Polly, will you stand by him?" "I have, for I just took Phil in a weakish moment and found out all I wanted to know. Ned is right and you are wrong, Pris, not in giving back the ring, but in seeming to cast him off entirely. He does not deserve that, for he was not to blame half so much as you think. But he won't excuse himself, for he feels that you are unjust, yet he loves you dearly, and you could do anything with him if you chose." "I do choose, Polly, but how can I marry a man whom I cannot trust?" began Pris sadly. "Now, my child, I am going to talk to you like a mother, for I've had experience with boys, and I know how to manage them," interrupted Polly, with such a charmingly maternal air that Pris laughed in spite of her trouble. "Be quiet and listen to the words of wisdom," continued her friend seriously. "Since I've taken care of Ned, I've learned a great deal, for the poor lad was so sick and sorry he couldn't shut his heart against me any more. So now I understand how to help and comfort him, for hearts are very much alike, Pris, and all need lots of love and patience to keep them good and happy. Ned told me his troubles, and I made up my mind that as we don't have so many temptations as boys, we should do all we can to help them and make them the sort of men we can both love and trust." You are right, Polly. I've often thought how wrong it is for us to sit safe and silent while we know things are going wrong, just because it isn't considered proper for us to speak out. Then when the harm is done, we are expected to turn virtuously away from the poor soul we might perhaps have saved if we had dared. God does not do so to us, and we ought not to do so to those over whom we have so much power," said Pris with a heart full of sad and tender memories. "We won't," cried Polly firmly. "We began in play, but we will go on in earnest, and use our youth, our beauty, our influence for something nobler than merely pleasing men's eyes or playing with their hearts. We'll help them to be good and brave and true, and in doing this we shall become better women and worthier to be loved, I know." "Why, Polly, you are quite inspired!" And Pris stopped in the snowy road to look at her. "It isn't all my wisdom. I've talked with Father as well as Ned and Phil, and they have done me good. I've discovered that confidence is better than compliments, and friendship much nicer than flirting. So I'm going to turn over a new leaf and use my good gifts for higher ends." "Dear thing, what a comfort you are," said Pris, pressing Polly's hands and looking into her bright face with grateful eyes. "You have given me courage to do my duty, and I'll follow your example as fast as I can. Don't come any farther, please. I'd rather be alone when I pass Phil's window, for I am going to nod and smile as I used to in the happy time. Then he will see that I don't cast him off and leave him to go down for want of help, but am still his friend until I dare be more. Now, Pris, that's just lovely of you, and I know it will work wonders. Smile and nod away, dear, and try to do your part as I'm trying to do mine." For an instant the little gray hat and the jaunty one with the scarlet feather were bent close together, but what went on under the brims, who can say? Then Polly trotted off as fast as she could go, and Pris turned into a certain street with a quicker step and a brighter color than she had known for weeks. She was late, for she had lingered with Polly, and she feared that patient watcher at the window would be gone. No, the brown head was there, but it lay wearily on the arms folded over a big book, and the eyes that stared out at the wintry sky had something tragic in them. Poor Phil did need encouragement, and was in the mood to take the worst sort if the best failed him, for life looked very dark just then, and solitude was growing unbearable. Suddenly, between him and the ruddy sunset, a face appeared, the dearest and loveliest in the world to him. Not half averted now, nor set straight forward, cold and quiet as a marble countenance, but bent towards him with a smile on the lips, and a wistful look in the tender eyes that made his heart leap up with sudden hope. Then it vanished, and when he sprung to the window nothing could be seen but the last wave of a well-known cloak fluttering round the corner. But Priscilla's first effort was a great success, for the magic of a kind look glorified the dingy office, and every bottle on the shelves might have been filled with the elixir of life, so radiant did Phil's face become. The almost uncontrollable desire to rush away and recklessly forget his loneliness in the first companionship that offered was gone now, for a happy hope peopled his solitude with helpful thoughts and resolutions. The tragic look left the eyes that still saw a good angel instead of a tempting demon between them and the evening sky. And when Phil shut up the big book he had been vainly trying to study, he felt that he had discovered a new cure for one of the sharpest pains the heart can suffer. Next morning, Pris unconsciously started for school too soon, so when she passed that window the room was empty. Resolved that Phil should not share her disappointment, she lifted the sash and dropped a white azalea on his desk. She smiled as she did it, and then whisked away as if she had taken instead of left a treasure. But the smile remained with the flower, I think, and Phil found it there when he hurried in to discover this sweet good morning waiting for him. He put it in the wine-glass which he had sworn never should be filled again with anything but water, and sitting down before it, listened to the little sermon the flower preached. for the delicate white azalea was Pris to him, and the eloquence of a pure and tender heart flowed from it, working miracles. One of them was that when sunset came, it shone on two faces at the window, and the little snowbirds heard two voices breaking a long silence. God bless you, Pris. God help you, Phil. That was all, but from that hour the girl felt her power for good and used it faithfully, and from that hour the young man worked bravely to earn the respect and confidence without which no love is safe and happy. We are friends now, they said, and when they were seen together again, and friends they remained in spite of shrugs and smiled, ill-natured speeches, and more than one attempt to sow discord between them, for people did not understand the new order of things. I trust him, was the only answer Pris gave to all warnings and criticisms. I will be worthy of her, was the vow Phil kept steady in spite of the ridicule that is so hard to bear, and gave him courage to flee from the temptation he was not yet strong enough to meet face to face. Portia and Polly stood by them staunchly, for having made her father's house a safe refuge, Portia offered Phil all the helpful influences of a happy home. Polly, with Ned to lend a hand, gave his comrade many a friendly lift, and when it was understood that the judge, the minister, and the sweet peas endorsed the young M.D., no one dared cast a stone at him. All this took time, of course, but Phil got his reward at last, for one night a little thing happened which showed him his own progress and made Pris feel that she might venture to wear the ring again. At a party, Phil was graciously invited to take wine with a lady and refused. It was a very hard thing to do, for the lady was his hostess, a handsome woman, and the mother of a flock of little children who all preferred the young doctor to the old one. And, greatest trial of all, several of his most dreaded comrades stood by to laugh at him, if he dared to let principle outweigh courtesy. But he did it, though he grew pale with the effort to say steadily, "Will Mrs. Ward pardon me if I decline the honor? I am—" There he stopped and turned scarlet, for a lie was on his lips. A lie so much easier to tell than the honest truth that many would have forgiven its utterance at that minute. His hostess naturally thought ill health was his excuse, and pitying his embarrassment said, smiling, "Ha! You doctors don't prescribe wine for your own ailments as readily as for those of your patients." But Phil, angry at his own weakness, spoke out frankly with a look that said more than his words. "I cannot accept even the kind excuse you offer me, for I am not ill. It may be my duty to order wine sometimes for my patients, but it is also my duty to prescribe water for myself." A dreadful little pause followed that speech, but Mrs. Ward understood now, and though she thought the scruple a foolish one, she accepted the apology like a well-bred woman, and with a silent bow that ended the matter, turned to other guests, leaving poor Phil to his fate. Not a pleasant one, but he bore it as well as he could, and when his mates left him stranded in a corner, he said half aloud with a long breath, as if the battle had been a hard one, "Yes, I suppose I have lost my patience, but I have kept my own respect, and that ought to satisfy me." "Let me add mine, and wish you health and happiness, dear Phil," said a voice behind him, and turning quickly he saw Pris standing there with 2 goblets of water and a smile full of love and pride. "You know what that toast means for me," he whispered with sudden sunshine in his face as he took the offered glass. "Yes, and I drink it with all my heart," she answered, with her hand in his. Chapter 6. How it ended. The leaven dropped by 3 girls in that little town worked so slowly that they hardly expected to do more than raise their own patty cakes, as Polly merrily expressed it. But no honest purpose is ever wasted, and by the by, the fermentation began. Several things helped it amazingly. The first of these was a temperance sermon, preached by Parson Snow, which produced a deep impression, because in doing this he had the courage, like Brutus, to condemn his own son. The brave sincerity, the tender earnestness of that sermon touched the heart of his people as no learned discourse had ever done, and bore fruit that well repaid him for the effort it cost. It waked up the old people, set the young ones to thinking, and showed them all that they had work to do. For those who were down felt they might be lifted up again. Those who were trifling ignorantly or recklessly with temptation saw their danger, and those who had longed to speak out now dared to do it because he led the way. So warned by the wolf in his own fold, this shepherd of souls tried to keep his flock from harm, and in doing it, found that his Christianity was the stronger, wiser, and purer for his humanity. Another thing was the fact that the judge was the first to follow his pastor's example and prove by deeds that he endorsed his words. It was hard for the hospitable old gentleman to banish wine from his table and forego the pleasant customs which long usage and many associations endeared to him, but he made his sacrifice handsomely, and his daughter helped him. She kept the sideboard from looking bare by filling the silver tankards with flowers, offered water to his guests with a grace that made a cordial of it, and showed such love and honor for her father that he was a very proud and happy man. What the judge did was considered all right by his neighbors, for he was not only the best born, but the richest man in town, and with a certain class these facts had great weight. Portia knew this and counted on it when she said she wanted him on her side, so she exulted when others followed the new fashion, some from principle, but many simply because he said it. At first the young reformers were disappointed that everyone was not as enthusiastic as themselves and as ready to dare and do for the cause they had espoused. But wiser heads than those on their pretty shoulders curbed their impetuosity and suggested various ways of gently insinuating the new idea, and making it so attractive that others would find it impossible to resist. For sunshine often wins when bluster makes us wrap our prejudices closer around us like the traveler in the fable. Portia baited her trap with Rowan parties, for she had been abroad, and made them so delightful that no one complained when only cake and tea was served, that being the style in the Eternal City, but went and did likewise. Artful Polly set up a comic newspaper to amuse Ned, who was an invalid nearly all winter, and it freed her mind on many subjects in such a witty way that the Polyanthus, as her brother named it, circulated through their set, merrily sowing good seed, for young folks will remember a joke longer than a sermon, and this editor made all hers tell. Pris was not behindhand in her efforts, but worked in a different way, and got up a branch society among her little pupils called the Water Babies. That captivated the mothers at once, and even the fathers found it difficult to enjoy their wine with blue eyes watching them wistfully over the rims of silver mugs, while the few toppers of the town hid themselves like night birds flying from the sun when, led by their gentle general, that little army of innocents marched through the streets with banners flying, blithe voices singing, rosy faces shining, and childish hearts full of the sweet delusion that they could save the world. Of course the matrons discussed these events at the sewing circle, and much talk went on of a more useful sort than the usual gossip about servants' sickness, dress, and scandal. Mrs. Judge waxed eloquent on the subject, and being president, everyone listened with due respect. Mrs. Ward seconded all her motions, for this lady had much surprised the town, not only by installing Phil as family physician, but by coming out strong for temperance. Somebody had told her all about the girls' labor of love, and she had felt ashamed to be outdone by them. So, like a conscientious woman, she decided to throw her influence into the right scale, take time by the forelock, and help to make the town a safer place for her 5 sons to grow up in than it was then. These 2 leading ladies kept the ball rolling so briskly that others were soon converted and fell into rank, till a dozen or so were heartily in earnest. And then the job was half done, for in great measure women make society what they choose to have it. We are told that home is our sphere, and advised to keep in it. So let us see that it is what it should be, and then we shall have proved our fitness for larger fields of labor if we care to claim them," said Mrs. Judge, cutting out red flannel with charitable energy on one occasion. "Most of us will find that quite as much as we can accomplish, I fancy," answered Mrs. Ward, thinking of her own riotous lads who were probably pulling the house about their ears while she made hoods for Mrs. Flanagan's bare-headed lasses. "'Pears to me we hain't no call to interfere in other folks' affairs. This was never a drinkin' town, and things is kept in frustrate order, so I don't see the use of such talk about temperance," remarked Miss Simmons, an acid spinster whose principal earthly wealth consisted of a choice collection of cats. "If your tabbies took to drinking, you would see the use, I'm sure," laughed Polly from the corner, which was a perfect posy bed of girls. "Thank goodness I've no menfolks to pester myself about," began Miss Simpsons with asperity. "Ah, but you should, for if you refuse to make them happy, you ought at least to see that they console themselves in ways which can work them no further woe," continued Polly gravely, though her black eyes danced with fun. "Well, that wouldn't be more than fair, I'm free to confess, but sakes alive, I couldn't attend to 'em all," said Miss Simmons, bridling with a simper that nearly upset the whole bevy of girls. "Do make the effort and help us poor things who haven't got your experience," added Pris in her most persuasive voice. "I declare I will. I'll have Hiram Stubbins in to tea, and when he is as good-natured as muffins and pie can make him, I'll set to see if I can't talk him out of his attachment to that brandy bottle," cried Miss Simmons with a sudden yearning towards the early sweetheart who had won but never claimed her virgin affections. "I think you'll do it, and if so, you will accomplish what no one else could, and you shall have any prize you choose," cried Portia, smiling so hopefully that the faded old face grew almost young again, and Miss Simmons went home with something better to do than tend her tabbies. "We've bagged that bird," said Polly with real satisfaction. "That's the way we set people to work," added Portia, smiling. "She will do what we can't, for her heart is in it," said Pris softly, and it was pleasant to see the blooming girls rejoice that poor old Hiram was in a fair way to be saved. So the year went round and Thanksgiving came again, and with the home jollity that makes a festival throughout the land. The day would not be perfect if it did not finish with a frolic of some sort, and for reasons of their own the young gentlemen decided to have the first sociable of the year an unusually pleasant one. "Everybody is going, and Ned said the supper is to be water ice and ice water," said Polly, taking a last look at herself in the long mirror when the three friends were ready on that happy evening. "I needn't sigh now over other girls' pretty dresses as I did last year," and Portia plumed herself like a swan as she settled Charlie's roses in her bosom. "And I needn't wonder who Phil will take," added Pris, stopping with her glove half on to look at the little ring back again from its long banishment in somebody's waistcoat pocket. Never had the hall looked so elegant and gay, for it was charmingly decorated. Couches were provided for the elders, mirrors for the beauties, and music of the best sounded from behind a thicket of shrubs and flowers. Everyone seemed in unusually good spirits. The girls looked their loveliest, and the young men were models of propriety, though a close observer might have detected a suspicious twinkle in the eyes of the most audacious, as if they plotted some new joke. The girls saw it, were on the watch, and thought the secret was out when they discovered that the gentlemen of their set all wore tiny pitchers, hanging like orders from the knots of sweet peas in their buttonholes. But bless their innocent hearts, that was only a ruse, and they were taken entirely by surprise when just before supper the band struck up, "Drink to me only with thine eyes," and everyone looked smilingly at the three girls who were standing together near the middle of the hall. They looked about them in pretty confusion, but in a moment beheld a spectacle that made them forget themselves, for the judge, in an impressive white waistcoat, marched into the circle gathered about them, made a splendid bow, and said, with a smile that put the gas to shame, Young ladies, I am desired by the gentlemen now present to beg your acceptance of a slight token of their gratitude, respect, and penitence. As the first man who joined this society which has proved a blessing to our town, Mr. William Snow will now have the honor of presenting the gift. Then appeared Mr. William Snow, looking as proud as a peacock, and well he might, for on the salver which he bore stood a stately silver pitcher. A grateful little Hebe danced upon the handle, 3 names shone along the fretted brim, and 3 white lilies rose from the slender vase, fit emblems of the maiden founders of the league. Arriving before them, Master Will nearly upset the equilibrium of his precious burden in attempting to make a bow equal to the judges, but recovered himself gallantly and delivered the following remarkable poem, which the public was expected to believe an emanation of his own genius. He poured the nectar forth when gods of old were jolly, but graces 3 our goblets fill, fair Portia, Pris, and Polly. Their draughts made every man who tastes happier, better, richer. So here we vow ourselves henceforth Knights of the Silver Pitcher. End of Section 3. Silver Pitchers, Chapters 5 and 6.